Alrighty guys, you'll have to forgive me. I had to pull off to the side of the road to record this video. I'm on my way home from the gym, but the sun is too low, messing up the light. I was getting blinded and washed out all at the same time. Not a good way to make a video. But so I pulled off the side of the road, and here we are. We're gonna have a talk. The talk we're gonna have about today is gonna be this viral video coming out of Columbus, Ohio, where there was a female police officer who responded to a call about an 11-year-old girl who was sending nude pictures of herself to an adult online. I'm trying to figure out the best way to kind of start this discussion, because everybody knows that the officer goofed up. That is not something in dispute at all. The officer screwed up. The officer made a mistake. That's without question, right? That's an unavoidable fact that the officer did not do the right thing in this situation. The facts of the case are that there was a man who called the police. According to the video, he called the police at somewhere around 6 p.m. and the police didn't arrive until midnight. That's something that's going to happen from time to time in a very busy city where there's a shortage of police officers. At least there's a shortage of police officers in relationship to the number of dispatch calls for service that are coming in. These are things that are undisputable facts. Sometimes you have to wait until midnight for a police officer to respond to something that doesn't involve, serious, immediate physical bodily harm, right? So the officers arrived at this guy's house at midnight. The guy comes out and says, "Hey, I just want you to talk to my daughter to tell her how bad this is, because I don't think there's anything you guys can really do about this." And that's when the officer says, "Well, just so you know, your daughter could be in trouble for distributing," and I'm not going to say the words because that can get you screwed up on YouTube, but for distributing graphic images of a juvenile. Everybody knows the word for that. And then the dad lost his mind, told them to leave, and they left. He sent that video to somebody online. That video went viral. Now, let's talk about what's really going on here. Trying to think of the best way to do this, because my take on it is going to be a little bit different than what a lot of people are saying. I think that when it comes to this video, everybody needs to this is a thing I say kind of in private a lot, is to say everybody needs to take a little sip of calm the F down, because that's what everybody needs to do in this case. When the officers responded to this call, and they had a call from a dad that says, "I just want you to talk to my daughter because I don't think there's anything official that you can do here," that automatically kind of put the officers in a sense where it's like, "Oh, you're calling the police to yell at your kid." And I think police officers are going to kind of have a bad attitude when it comes to that kind of call for service. And the way I kind of want to address it is, and I'm not blaming the dad because the dad didn't necessarily know, but there is something that the police can do in this case. There is an appropriate way to handle this. The appropriate way to handle this is, the officers talk to the dad, talk to the daughter, call upstairs, get a detective. A detective is going to tell you, because I've taken a bunch of these reports, detective is going to say, take the phone, turn it into the proper room, take a report, put the phone and the report under my name. I will follow up. And then the detectives are going to go do what detectives do. I think in a case like this, they'll probably do a forensic interview, which is a thing that, police officers in sexually related crimes, we don't talk to juvenile victims. They go to a child behavioral center, and there's a specialist that's going to talk to them about that kind of stuff. And I think it's a forensic interview or something like that, where they're specially trained in order to get the right information out of children, and it's information that can be used to testify in court. Because juveniles, especially like an 11-year-old, that testimony it's not that it's not admissible to court, but it doesn't carry the amount of weight that a testimony from an adult or from a 15, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, someone who is nearly adult. It doesn't carry that kind of weight. So with a forensic interview, that's a whole process that people can go through, and Sorry, my watch is freaking out on me. Said I had an irregular heart rate. Hope I don't have a heart attack. That's a whole process that that child is going to go through in order to be able to testify, or in order for her side of the story to make it into court. This is the kind of information that you get when you've experienced this kind of run a few times before. Now, I want to talk about this particular officer because I know this officer. She's a young woman, and she has 3 years of experience on the police department. I think it's generally accepted amongst experienced police officers or police officers who have some years under their belt that it takes you about 5 years to fully grasp your job as a police officer, before you actually have a handle on what's going on and the appropriate way to do most things in your job as a police officer. She has 3 years on as a police officer. Therefore, in my mind, she's still a very new officer and doesn't know what she's doing. One of the reasons I mention this, and this is something that I'm going to tell you is going to be more of a problem in the coming years, because police departments across the country are losing senior officers. They're from 2020 to 2022. Departments across the country, and especially my department, lost a huge number of experienced officers. There were officers that were resigning to go do something else, starting lawn care companies or some other kind of business. There were officers that were lateral transferring to other agencies, whether it be a state agency or a suburb agency or something like that. I know a lot of our officers went to suburb agencies. A lot of officers just took their retirement. They had their 25 years in and they said, I'm taking my pension. I'm out of here. I'm going to go work at Walmart or Home Depot or something for the rest of my life. And then another crazy thing is that the mayor and city council approved an incentive to have the top 100 most experienced officers leave the department. When you have that, my department alone lost like 300 officers, and those 300 officers were replaced with 150 brand new officers. The effect that has is incredible. When I got a job as a police officer, I started working third shift. On my unit, we had an 11-person unit. The amount of experience that we had on the unit when I came to third shift, we had one person that had probably 27, 28 years on. Another person had 25 years on. Another person was 16 years on. And another guy with and then there were 2 people with 13 years on. And then there was three of us that had 1 or 2 years on. When you're one of those guys that has 1, 2, up until you have 5 years on, the majority of what you should be doing is following around these people, these older heads, and learning how to do the job from them. What's going on in the police department right now is that those old heads aren't around. So you have officers that are coming out of the academy, coming off coaching, and they're hitting the street, and the senior person on their unit has 5, 6, 7 years on the street. That means that those officers don't have those boomers to learn from. They don't have those calmer heads to learn from. The people that they're learning police work from are people that are barely older than them, barely have any more experience than them. This was a call where it was really, the call was a pandering obscenities call. Even though it didn't say that, that's what the call really was. The officers read the run. It just says, we have a father who just wants them to speak to his daughter, is not asking for a report. And then when he gets there, he says, I just want you to talk to her. I don't think there's anything you guys can do. So he's basically reaffirming in their head that we don't have to take a report here. So they began talking, and she was talking wrong. She was saying the wrong things, but he said, basically, you know what, screw you guys, I don't like your attitude, get off my porch. And they said, happy to accommodate you, sir. And then they turned and they walked off of his porch. That's what really happened. Now, I mentioned it, right? That they didn't do the right thing. This isn't the right thing. That as a police officer in that situation, you should start to pick up on what he's actually saying. You should start to pick up on, wait a minute, I think this is a pandering obscenities to a minor case. Here's what we need to do. We need to talk to the dad, get his information, get the daughter's information, get the phone, call a detective, do all those things. But with only 3 years of experience and working third shift for that entire 3 years, they haven't had that experience. I can tell you that the majority of my pandering and my sexual assault cases, well, sexual abuse involving children cases, those have come since I was on first shift. I don't think I had any of those when I was working third shift for my prior 10 years. The other thing that I kind of want to bring up, and I saw this, I forgot the guy's name. I feel really bad about this because he's a good dude. He makes a lot of good videos. He has that Breaking Barriers United is his Instagram. I think that's his YouTube as well. He does a lot of those use of force scenarios with civilians and people that aren't trained on uses of force, and runs them through scenarios and stuff. If you don't know him, he's a good guy. I'd recommend that you follow him. I'm assuming if you follow me, you follow him. But he talked about it today, and he had a really good analogy that I'm going to steal for a moment. He said that, think about police officers as eggs, and you put a police officer out on the street, and they are just a regular fresh egg. They start going to call after call after call, working night upon night upon night. Then you have a department that's short, so you're asking these new officers, these fresh eggs, to work a couple of 16-hour days a week. Those 16-hour days, you're dealing with the absolute worst people in our society. That egg, it's like you're putting an egg in hot water and you're boiling it, and that egg becomes hard. What you were seeing with that female officer is what happens to a lot of police officers when they're new. They actually kind of become hardened. And this also reminds me of, there was a sergeant when I was in the academy. His name is Fred. I'm going to give him his credit here, even though I'm not going to give his full name in this video. He wrote like a dissertation once before I got into the academy. He was very proud of it. And he talked about the different phases of being a police officer. And I don't remember it very well. I want to say that he had like 12 phases, something. It was crazy. He's a very wordy guy. He's a very smart guy. But I think it can be broken down into 3. When you come onto the street, out of the academy as a police officer, just like that egg, you're very fresh. This stuff is all very foreign to you. Your eyes are wide open. You've never experienced this before. The kind of trauma that you're witnessing, you've never experienced before. The kind of people going through mental health crisis you've never seen before. The delusions, all that kind of stuff. The drug use, just the loss of humanity that you're dealing with as a new police officer is overwhelming. And you kind of, like the hard-boiled egg situation, you realize that you're really soft and you have to harden up. And what new police officers do, instead of taking incremental steps in order to harden up their approach, they go from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other end of the spectrum. So then you've got a police officer that's got 2, 3, 4 to 5 years on, and they are hard as nails. Every single person out there is a criminal. They're gonna slam the book at them. They're gonna do everything they can. They're gonna run every single charge. They're gonna arrest every single person. Everybody goes to jail. I'm gonna save the world. You get that approach, and that's where this officer is right now. I was in that position before too. The stupid mistakes that I made as a new officer. They don't necessarily stand out, but one of them does. I remember one night I was trying a motivational tactic, and it was the wrong tactic to try. I was dispatched on a call on an elderly female that was unresponsive. We responded. We got there about the same time as the medics. We let the medics go into the room with the lady, and we took her husband, an elderly man, into another room. She had a pulse, but she wasn't conscious and she wasn't doing well. They loaded her up in the gurney. They said, this is where we're going. So we told the guy, hey, bud, she's not dead. She's alive. She's going to the hospital. You need to get to the hospital with your wife. And he was overwhelmed. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't handle it. He just stood there and he cried. And I remember initially being very sympathetic towards him. I was like, sir, I'll drive you there. We need to get going. We can't stay here. You need to be at the hospital with your wife. Because in my brain, just knowing the facts, there's a good chance that she wasn't going to live for very much longer. I wanted him to get to the hospital to be with his wife for her final moments. And he was just in a state of shock. He couldn't snap out of it. I tried to snap out of it, tried to snap him out of it. And the way I tried to snap him out of it was I said, I went into drill sergeant mode. I wasn't like mean, but I was like, listen, it's like, your wife is in an ambulance right now, going to the hospital. She needs you. You need to put on your shoes. You need to put on your coat, get in my car. I'm taking you to the hospital. That did not go over well. I sent him deeper into his state of shock. I learned something that night. I learned from that experience. I learned that that's not a very good approach, that you can't use that approach on very many people. I've used that approach on a lot of people, younger people, people in the military, other cops. I've used that approach before, but it's not a universal approach. I learned a very important lesson that night, and learning those lessons has made me the cop that I am today. You guys have seen how I am on the street, how I treat people with, drug problems and mental health problems and all of these crises that they're going through. I learned that through a series of making mistakes on the street when I was a new officer. Now I just want to remind you that we have a situation where a new officer responded to a call. She made a mistake. She makes a mistake that is not the specific one, but it's not too uncommon from mistakes that new officers are going to make. As long as we're going to have officers, and these officers are going to be human beings, these kinds of mistakes are going to be made by new officers, because until you've experienced it, you don't know exactly what you're going to do and say. A third shift officer almost never responds to a call about pandering obscenities to a minor. I believe that's the code it's going to fall under in the state of Ohio. She was probably, and she's very young. She doesn't have children of her own. In her mind, when she's thinking about an 11-year-old, she's thinking about these 12-year-olds that are out here stealing cars and shooting people. In her mind, because she doesn't have children of her own, she associates this 11-year-old with these 12-year-olds that are damn near adults. I'm not making an excuse for her. I'm not saying that she did the right thing. I'm saying she did the wrong thing. But also, the thing that I want everybody to understand is that she just made a mistake. People are going to make mistakes. Every single police officer that goes through a 30-year career, hopefully, is going to make a bunch of mistakes like that. We're human. All of the people out there that are demanding her job, the majority of the people that are saying those things, they can never do the job in the first place. Everybody just needs to take a sip of calm the hell down. And it's frustrating that everybody is out here making these reaction videos to this. Some of them are incredibly disappointing. Probably the most disappointing one that I saw so far was from Mike the Cop. He came out, made this video. He said, yeah, she did the wrong thing. And if this is the way she's going to respond to this, maybe she shouldn't be a cop. Maybe Mike the Cop forgot what it's like to actually be a cop. He hasn't been a cop for a very long time. I think he's probably getting close to having not been a cop for as long as he was a cop. Maybe it's time that he stops talking about cop stuff. I don't know. But those are going to be my thoughts on that young female officer and the 11-year-old girl. The way it should have been handled and the way it was handled. I don't think she needs to be fired. I think that's ridiculous. I promise you, she's learning from this experience, and it's not going to happen again.